I was laughing talking about how braving the cold weather. I was driving on 590, and there was one of those cars that like just refused to warm it up before it drove. So it literally was just like an ice mobile, like driving, and I'm like, really, dude? You couldn't spend the extra few minutes to just warm her up before you hit the road? So good morning. Thank you for bearing the cold and being here. I am Andrea Holland, and I am a communication coach, for lack of a better term. I work with executives, I work with teams, companies, on how to communicate more effectively, whether that's public speaking, media training, leadership communication style, whether it's a team or one individual. I work with, you name it, I've worked with them. And I've had my company for 6 years, but I've worked in the field of marketing and communications and broadcast media for 17 years. I'm dating myself now. Yeah, we're getting up there. About 17 years. So my passion is always helping people to find their voice when they need it, to have the influence that they need on their most important audiences when it matters the most. So to start us off this morning, I'm going to throw out a thought, and I just want you guys to think about this. What if I said that what if every conversation you have, okay, business or personal, involved somehow the exchange of money? I'm seeing this. What would that do to the way we think about conversations? Meaning that every time you speak, you're paying someone, okay? And every time they listen to you, they're paying you. How would that frame our reference around communication and conversations? What do we think?
It would make it more purposeful.
Ah, yes. What else?
You'd be more careful.
Right? Yes. Yeah, because there's value involved, right? There's an actual transaction happening. But a lot of times we don't look at our conversations that way. And we know this because have you ever had the conversation with the long talker? They just go and go and go, and you're like, what is the point of all of this, right? Or the pop-in or the one-upper. I had a conversation with the one-upper the other day. Literally, it was just, it didn't matter what I said. They were like, no, I got a better one. I'm like, yes, we know you have a better one. Continue. So if that's true, right? So if that were true, if every conversation we had some monetary value associated with it, we might think a little bit differently every time we interact with people. Well, what if we apply it to this reference point? Every business conversation you have, actually every conversation, business or personal, should somehow be developing you and your leadership skills and your leadership influence, or directly adding revenue to your bottom line. What do we think about that? Overreaching, too much, right on point? What do we think? I know you didn't come here to just listen to me talk at you for an hour, so please share. What do we think?
A lot of pressure.
Pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Could be a little intimidating, right? But if we understand that there's value involved in every time we interact with someone, we might be a little more purposeful. We might take the time to stop and say, what's actually happening in this conversation? So when we say, well, leadership influence, building better relationships, what's the value to all of that? Well, if you're working for a traditional company, more leadership opportunities means what?
More money.
I like to shortchange everything and just say, let's get right to it. The money, okay? More leadership opportunities means more money, more influence, yeah? Small business owners. Who are my small business owners? Yes. Okay, small business owners. What if every conversation you had meant more money in the door? That's a number all us small business owners love to hear that too, right? So if that's true, and we know that our communication, our conversations are an important piece of our success, is it worth spending some time this morning to, I'm going to put it this way, let's take a very safe but small lens and look at the way that we interact with other people and be mindful and strategic about how we interact with others. Would that be worth our time? Yeah? Okay, so that is what we're going to do today. This is not a session where I talk at you. We're going to get involved. We're going to do some stuff. We're going to have a little fun here. But we're going to take a good look at how is it that we're interacting, and what is the value that we're bringing, and what is the value that we're receiving every time we interact with someone. Fair game?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, so I always like to start with a little warm-up because it's early, and I know we have coffee, but that's just never enough. So, we all got a little card. This side has a card with a red star on it. This side has a card with a blue card on it, or a blue star, or a circle on it, okay? In a moment, we're going to pick somebody in the room who has an opposite color card from us, which means we must get up from our seat. Oh my God! We're going to get up, and this is a lovely, big, spacious room, so there's plenty of room to do it in. We're going to pick somebody with an opposite color card, and we're just going to have very simple 2-minute conversation. Let's say we'll talk about our weekend, either what you did last weekend or what you're doing this weekend. Random conversation with a random person. The only instruction is follow the direction on the back of your card. So if you haven't flipped it over yet, take a look at the card, okay? Yeah, that, already, okay? So do not tell the other person what's on the opposite side of your card. Just have the conversation and follow the instruction. Cool? Any questions? All right, so let's get up and find somebody. And if you need a partner, come find me. Come find somebody. We'll pair you up.
Hi. How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. Awesome. Do you want to be partners? Sure. All right. Yeah.
Hi.
I know. We're already putting the thing spread out. We got room.
How are you doing, Teresa?
Everyone paired up? You're not? Okay. What's happening? What's happening? Red? Okay. Another 60 seconds and we'll wrap it up. Okay, let's all have a seat. Good job, everybody. Good job. Ooh, I'm so sorry. Good job. Okay.
Hey, how are you? Doing well.
I'm already impressed.
Okay, so, just before we reveal, in case you don't know what was on the other side of the card, how did those conversations go?
Awkward.
Awkward, awful? What else? Anybody find it easy? No? There's always one person. I do this exercise with a lot of different groups, and there's always at least one person in the group who's like, that was so easy because they got a direction that totally fit with their personality. But I could tell already that that was not the case. Okay, so in case we don't know, someone with a blue card, tell us what the direction was on the back of your card.
It was, keep your responses to one-word answers like yes, no, good, thanks.
So their job, in case you didn't pick up on it, their job was to be, yes. Claudia asked me how my weekend was. I said, it was good. What'd not much. What else? Relaxed. Like that was it, right? On this side of the room,
Oh my God.
with the red star, somebody share with us what the instructions said.
Let's talk about me for a minute.
That was the instruction. They had to say that sentence. Work it into the conversation. Let's talk about me for a minute. Okay. How did that feel trying to pull that one off?
Not easy.
Not easy. No?
Self-centered.
Self-centered? Yeah. Yeah. And how was it to just keep it to the one-word answers?
Difficult.
Tristan's like, oh my God, right? Yeah. I wanted to scream. Okay, so this was perhaps a dramatization. Okay. But what does this tell us about everyday simple conversations? What do we think? What does it show us?
That they're easy,
On the other side.
That they're easy?
like comparatively.
Yeah, could be.
For me, it showed me you had to work for, depending on their responsiveness, you had to work to get your point across.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard another answer somewhere. Sorry, say it again. Was it?
It just wasn't easy, yeah.
Wasn't easy. Yeah. So here's the interesting thing about this exercise. All I did was give you a suggestion. You didn't have to do it, but you did it. But I gave you a suggestion and you followed it, right? What does that say about limitations when we go into situations? Let's say we're at the good old networking situation, with the bad cheese spread and the whole 9 yards, with the pineapple that everyone's picked over. Yeah, so you're standing there and you're having that conversation and it's like, hey, how's it going? Right? And the other person pulled a blue card and they're going, good. Right? Nobody has a goal in mind. Usually in those situations, the goal is to say, hi, my name is, Regina Phalange, and I work for Company X, and you should buy my product, thank you. That's the, let's talk about me for a minute, spun a different way. So when we have conversations, it's very easy to go into it with either no focus or intention, or too much of a focus and intention, and we're not thinking about the other person. This is how conversations go wrong very quickly, right? So, dramatization, but what we're going to do today is think about a few ideas. Now, I could have given you guys 20 ideas, okay? But the reality is, there's a lot of different ways that you can focus your communication and get good results. I'm going to give you three big ideas to think about. We're going to talk them through, we're going to maybe try them out, see how it works. There's many other ways you can do this, but it's more practical to walk away from here today with 3 actual things that you can implement and do versus a list of 20 on a piece of paper that you'll tuck into your folder and go, that was so great, I'll never do these, bye. That ain't realistic, right? But we're going to focus on 3. They're not the only 3, but it's a starting point. And one thing to consider, as we increase in our career, okay, wherever you are in your career, whether you're starting out or you've been there for a while or you own a business, you started it yesterday or you've had it for years, as we go up the chain, if you will, our job is less and less to do, okay, to execute, and more to communicate. Because as we lead, we have to get things done through other people. And to prove it to you, who had the worst, best first job? What was the first job you ever had?
Fast food restaurant.
Fast food restaurant.
Yeah, putting the burgers into the grill.
Oh, okay, that sounds... I pictured burned fingers, I'm sorry, I don't know. So putting the burgers into the grill, okay. So you no longer do that, right? Okay, yes, okay, great, right? So how did you grow out of that? What do you do now?
Oh, I'm the communications manager for Rochester Rio.
Okay, so as we go up, it's less and less to do and more to communicate effectively to get others to do what we need them to do. So if that's true for you, and you're going places, which I presume everybody in this room is, let's look at 3 ideas. Questions so far? Thoughts, comments, recipes? I'm open for all of it, okay? So just keep that in mind. Okay, so, it's the holiday time.
Just ask for the cookies.
Or cookies, just bring the cookies.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at 3 big ideas and techniques to try. Again, these are just 3. We could go on forever, but we're going to focus here. And the reason I chose these particular 3, by the way, is 1, they are foundational to building relationships. There's many other steps that you can add to them. But also, I've been finding a lot of this going on with my clients. So a lot of the questions I've been getting from clients lately surround these 3 techniques. So it's something that I've been talking a lot about with clients at the current moment, and I figured if it was relevant for them, it had to be relevant for others as well. Okay, so we're going to break these out. We're going to hang on this slide. I'm not one for 30 million slides. The first idea is to be insanely curious. In other words, ask questions. What is the power of asking questions?
It makes the other people feel like you're genuinely interested in them.
Yeah, absolutely. When somebody asks questions, we feel like, oh, you're taking the time to care and ask questions about me.
You learn a lot.
Oh, yes. Yes. This is one of those pieces that I think, how many of us feel, I'm just curious, that we have to always be right or know our stuff when we're on the job? There's a pressure to always have it right, always have the answer. Anybody feel that way on the job? I used to work for someone who shall remain nameless. People say they've worked for, like, the devil, but I've actually worked for Satan, and I know who she. My dear friend knows of what I speak. I keep tabs on said person because I need to know where she's working at all times. I do. I seriously do. It's the truth. I tell no lies. But she had this way of being where she never cared about you. She was only interested in what you could give her. And she made that very clear from day 1. And so it was always this push-pull thing with her. It was like, okay, do I really want to make you happy today? Or it was a weird working relationship. But she always would come up to me at a moment's notice and say, where are we on this project? Where are we with project XYZ, ABC? What did you do last night? What are your plans for this weekend? What is the plan? I'm like, I don't know. It was such a huge amount of pressure to have all the answers. And it taught me to work in a way that was very frazzled. It wasn't very neat. It was just always on edge. So I think as leaders, a lot of times we feel like we need to know all the answers. We have to have everything right, because if we don't, somebody could call us out on it and say, I see your flaws. But when we ask questions, we learn. Anyone in sales? Yeah? Technically, we're all in sales, correct? But I mean, who are my people that are actually getting the road selling something, right? So, what's the value of learning about what a client or a prospect wants or needs?
You fit the product to their needs.
Yeah, exactly. We know when someone's trying to sell us on something, and it doesn't feel good, right? Daniel Pink, in his book, I think it was called To Sell is Human. It's a fantastic read if you haven't. It's an older read, but it's a great read. It reads really fast. He talks about, anyone who's in sales knows about the ABCs. ABCs, want to say what it is?
Always be closing.
Always be closing, right? Well, so in this book, he puts forth the premise of always be connecting instead, as a different lens on sales. Because when we can connect with people, we learn what it is that they want. And if I know what it is that you want as an individual, how does that allow me to motivate you? Have you ever had a boss or somebody come up to you and say, you should really do this, it's for the good of the team? And you're like, the team ain't waking up with me on Saturday morning, so I don't know if I feel so good about the team right now. Right? And they're like, you should be a team, you should care. And you're like, well, not really that much, but okay, if my job depends upon it, I'll do it. We can't motivate people if we don't know what they really want. I had a recent experience where a colleague of mine said to me, instead of saying, you should really do this because, it's good for the client and it's good for us if you do this. Instead, she said to me, you know what, Andrea? You have a reputation for being that person who always does her very best. Like you're going to put everything that you possibly can out on the line. And I know this about you. So if you want to maintain that reputation, here's my suggestion on how you can crush it. That motivated me far more than saying, do it for the team. And that's not to say I'm a selfish person, but we all have needs. We all have baseline desires that we want. So if you think about it, the people that you work with, potential clients that you have, it could be personal too. Maybe there's someone personal in your life. Who is someone that you could be asking more questions of? And why? What would you get out of it if you knew more about that person? And what would you ask her? You don't have to say it out loud, but take a note, write it down. This is something that you want to try doing. Because asking questions and being curious leads to an influx of information. And the more knowledge we have, the greater we can lead others. And it builds confidence in ourselves. Because a lot of the times we feel the need to keep talking. Because I'm the boss, I'm in charge, I know everything. Just listen. Just listen. So if you want, throw one out. Is there a person that if you could get to know them better, someone on your team, could be an intern, that if you had a better relationship with them, meaning you asked them some more questions, you might be surprised at what you've learned. Or does anyone have any experience with that in recently having done that? Having gotten to know someone in a different lens? Any thoughts?
I think that always translates in our business to getting to know clients even better. Like you can, the more that you know about them, the more you know their needs,
Yeah.
what they like, So if you're
What
sending
is-
them a Christmas card, you can tailor it to them or something like that.
Right. I just wrote a blog the other day about, or I think I sent an email about this. There's nothing more joyless in my life than when I receive a holiday card, and it's just a photo with the bottom, and it just says like, Gary.
That's just sweet.
Well, it's like a photo, it's like a business photo or a card, and it just says, it imprinted on the card, it says, all the season's greetings to you. And the bottom, it just says, Gary. And I'm like, well, thanks, man, that's cool, but after all the work we did this year, or all the conversations we had, or touch points, all you gotta say is, Gary. Take a minute. Hey, Andrea, really loved working with you. That was a great whatever project you did, or, hope all is well. XOXO Gary, but it's just Gary. And I know, it sounds bizarre, but these are the things where you think, well, what's that relationship like, and how much is he investing in people? He spent the money on the card. I know Shutterflying the Chief, so just throwing that out there. But if we get to know people from a different lens, suddenly we have valuable information that we can use. So for yourselves, think about it. Write down one name, one person. Could be a family member that you're going to talk to over the holidays. Could be a colleague that you really should probably get to know a little bit better. An intern could be someone you've not met yet. I've done this a lot in my career. I've reached out to people and said, I've heard your name mentioned at least 3 different times in different conversations. Something tells me that you and I would really have a great meeting if we met. Can we have coffee? Give me 30 minutes. And that's how I've made some great connections. Literally, it's like a random email, but it's like, I keep hearing your name, which tells me that I should meet you. So let's have coffee. Could be someone that you haven't met, someone you want to meet. Write down one name, and think about what questions you might ask them, and what you get out of it. Because we don't do anything just because it's a neat idea. The only thing that motivates us to truly do things is because we know that there's some value in it for us. So think about that for yourselves. Take a second, jot down a name. If you want to share, you can. You don't have to.
Andrea,
Yes.
can you repeat what you just said? I keep hearing your name. What was that line you just had? It was, I keep hearing your name,
With the, I'm like Ron Burgundy. Sometimes I say things and it comes out and then I don't know what I just said. I've reached out to people and I've said, I keep hearing your name in conversations, or your name has been brought up to me. Actually, that's even a better way to say it. Your name has been brought up to me at least twice or 3 times in the last month, whatever it is. Something tells me we should meet. I'd love to treat you to a cup of coffee. Do you have 30 minutes? And see what happens. Did I see a hand? Did you have? Yeah.
Yeah, I can share one.
Go, please.
So recently I've heard a lot about Adrian Hale, who works for the chamber, and like I heard all these impressive things. So finally, like I saw him at an event, and I was like, hey, like I want to get to know you. Let's
Yeah.
grab a beer. And we were supposed to meet for like 15 to 30 minutes, and we ended up talking for like 2 hours, and like blew my mind, and like
Yes.
wow, I learned so much. And he's like, I learned a lot from you, and now I think it'll be a continuing thing.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. And you have that opportunity to say, we spent 60 minutes together, or however long, chatting about whatever. You have those reference points to go back to. It's a brilliant way to reach out to people. Awesome. Good job. By the way, I've seen him on my list. That's somebody I got to reach out to. I've seen his name multiple times. So the second idea to share is waste no words. So whenever I coach people on public speaking, I'm constantly putting forth this idea to that no word should ever be wasted. It feels like no child should be left behind. No word should ever be wasted. Because when we're speaking to an audience, or we're sending them an email, or we're having conversation with somebody, every word counts. Maya Angelou said, and I'm going to not say it exactly the way she said it, but it was one of my favorites. She said, words are things. Be mindful of words. Words get into the walls, they get into the drapes, they get into the furniture, into your clothing, and eventually into you. Words are things. So use them powerfully. So the idea here is to be intentional, and for all my PR marketing folks, you'll love this one. This is a throwback to how long I've been working. Live above the fold. Anyone want to share what that idea means? They think it means? Rezi?
It's the top news in the newspaper, that when it was folded over in the newsstand, it was, the most important news was above the fold.
Above the fold, right? So you go see the paper, it's like, you gotta have this, because it's above the fold, right? So if every conversation we had started with relevant, important information, or some way of grabbing folks' attention and getting them to think, how would that change every email, every talk we've listened to, every meeting with the boss? We used to have what we called the weekly meeting. I still call it the weekly beating. So it was like, you show up and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to get slammed with today? There was nothing in there that was of any value other than you aren't doing a good job. And that was for everybody across the board. I told you who I worked for. So, above the fold, being intentional in how you start conversations. I read this book a few months ago. I was traveling, I was in Chicago, and I fell victim to a dead phone with no ability to read anything online, so I had to buy a book at Hudson News, like I had to. I was like, oh, fine. So I got this great book, and I'm forgetting the author of it, but he put forth the idea of a 3-sentence email. Anyone ever heard this idea? Okay, so how do most of our emails begin? Yes, like type it out. Dear Gary.
Hope you are well.
Hope all is well. What's next? Boy, we've been having some cold weather here. Dot, dot, dot. Hope you're staying warm. Exclamation point, winky emoji. New line, okay? The reason I'm writing to you is, colon, in our recent meeting, you and I discussed the possibility that perhaps you might be interested in learning how to sail a boat. Well, as luck would have it, I have the opportunity to teach. What's Gary doing by this point?
Not reading.
He done scanned by and said, I don't know nothing about what you love you, but I have no time for this. How many emails do we get a day? I mean, it's like, it just never stops. I was one of the fortunate last few, technically millennials, to come out of, I was technically, I got an email when I was a freshman in college. They were like, hold on to this, it's called an electronic mail address. And I'm like, what is this? I don't know what this is. When I started working, there were pagers. There was a team pager, okay? You legit had a beeper, okay? But there was no, I think Netscape or Ask Jeeves was the only search engine I worked in. Ask Jeeves, ooh. It's real technology, man. Work didn't follow you home as easily, right? It wasn't driving next to you in the car with your phone dinging the whole way home, and you know it's the boss or the email or that proposal or something you got to review before you go to bed tonight, right? Work is constantly following us around. So if we want to cut through the clutter, and you want to get your emails replied, this author put forth the idea of the 3-sentence email, and I was terrified to do it because why would we be afraid to cut out all the clutter and just go with a 3-sentence email?
Looks like it's not nice.
There it is. It's not nice. Right? I felt the same way. I was like, I can't email Gary like that. That's not nice. But to prove it to you, I was sitting on about, I think it was almost $20,000 worth of potential new business with a few folks that I'd been emailing back and forth with forever with the whole, hey, how's it going? What a lovely Friday. So I finally just said, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And I'm going to try this out. And let me tell you guys, I almost had an attack hitting send. But I sent out these emails to these people. And I said, Gary, are you still interested in working with me? The calendar's booking up. Let me know. Hope you're well, Andrea. And I hit send. Oh, I was like, oh, I'm reliving it again. I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? I ruined months of relationship building. Do you know I closed at about, I think it was like 85% of that business within the day? It was done. Yes, I want to work with you. Absolutely. What's next? Send me the contract. I've been going months with the whole, how's it going? How are the puppies? You know? And it cut right to it. I didn't eliminate the hope all is well line. I kept that in there because I care about people. I truly do. But lead with what's important. Be above the fold. Get people thinking. So if you're going to lead a meeting, or you're going to meet with a client, or you're going to have a weekly meeting with your team, with the boss, right? Start with something intentional. Don't just go in and go, hey, how you doing? So you, right, well, let's start the meeting. You know, or job interviews. How many of us have to interview people as part of our work? Yeah? I work with clients a lot who are, looking for different placement and they're trying to find new opportunities, and I always tell them, I'm like, read your resume before you walk in. And they're like, why? I'm like, you know how many resumes they get? They don't have time to memorize yours. Some people just don't prepare before an interview. You have to be prepared. Same thing with news interviews, right? You gotta know. My favorite thing with reporters is reporters are overworked. I say that I have a sister who works in news, okay, so I can fairly say this. Reporters are some of the hardest working people out there because there's more to do with less time, and everybody has that story, but they legitimately have to turn around how many different packages in a day. So when they show up to you, my favorite thing that reporters will ask is walk up to you, put a mic in your face, and go, so what's happening here? And unless there's like a wildfire behind you, you have to paint a scene. You have to know how to tell a story, how to start off with something interesting. Otherwise, it's like, well, we all gathered here at the farm because there was a pumpkin patch. Lost the opportunity there, right? You gotta start with something. Live above the fold. So, I'm dramatic, but if you think about it, is there an email that maybe you've avoided responding to? Because you gotta do the hope all is well thing. Is there a way that you could start your next meeting? What's coming up for you? Do you have an upcoming meeting? Do you have an upcoming sales pitch? Do you have a potential meet and greet with a client? Do you have a networking scenario? What could you say differently than what you normally do now to try and see if you get a different result? Anyone have a thought or a question? I can help you with it. No? It's okay. You can come up to me later if you want to. But be intentional. Oh, yes.
That's a good question. So back to that cutting to the chase and leaving it how are the puppies. In your experience and in your research and your training, have you found, with the whole men are from Mars or men are from Venus type of thing, we know we communicate differently.
Yes.
Have you found that men respond more to the cut to the chase than women?
I've actually seen a split. This is my experience, okay, so this is a sample size of one here. But I've seen it evenly split down the road. And a lot of this has to do with, one, your personality. Some of us are drivers, if you're familiar with DISC, for example. Some of us are drivers, and some of us are more people-oriented. And yes, across the genders, there are vast differences. So as a generalization, okay, because everyone's different, let's not take this as the letter of the law, but as a generalization, women are more relationship and people-focused, and men tend to be more results and task-focused, okay? So I know we're all laughing, we're like, okay, it's true, right? as a generalization, right? So because of that, we have to still be mindful in how we respond to people, even if we do a 3-sentence email. Sometimes, and it takes a little practice, but sometimes the total difference between, hey Gary or hi Gary makes a difference. It sounds silly, but words are things, they are tools, they are powerful. Keep in mind, how do you all end your emails?
Best regards.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Much appreciation.
Take care, much appreciation, all my best. Right? So I started to change it up a bit because I recognized that I was going to start becoming more brief in my email responses. But I still wanted to include, clearly by now you know I'm somebody who likes to have fun. That's not obvious. So I was like, I still need to include that element of me for the people that are relationship driven, but it doesn't detract from the overall point of driving a result. So I end all my emails with high fives and good vibes. I end them all. And I was somewhere recently, and this guy came up to me and he goes, high fives and good vibes. And I was like, yes indeed, you got it. Okie dokie, right? I was like, you remembered it. I'm not the sincerely warmest regards. There's a CEO friend of mine who I keep telling her, I'm like, you need to just start ending your emails with, I'm just saying, ... She's like, I might actually do that. I'm like, girl, I'm telling you, that's where you need to go. She's a powerful lady, and I was like, you just go for it. So, we can still insert our personality. There's another one. What would your new tag be in 2019? How would you end your emails if you just had to think of something different besides, and there's nothing wrong with sincerely and best regards, but everybody sees that. And I thought, hope all is well. When I started doing that, I don't know, 10 years ago, I thought I was clever. I was like, hope all is well. Now I see it everywhere, and I'm like, oh, I thought of that one, right? So, be intentional, above the fold. Find a unique way of communicating that is distinct to you, that is focused on getting others' attention and getting them to buy in instantly to what it is you're saying. Whether you start with maybe a question, maybe you ask a question to start. I did that today. So what if all of our conversations had a financial value attached to it? I'm talking about money now. You got my attention, right? So think of different ways to do this. An email signature is different. Who do you need to send a 3-sentence email to? Try it out. Do it in a safe environment. I did it. I went for it. I was like, woo, we're going to see what happens here. But I've had good results with it. And what it's done for me is improve my productivity overall, because I'm one of those people that can sit on an email because I feel like I don't have the right response. I don't have all the answers. And I need to take the time to say, hope all is well. How are the puppies? Instead I'm on it, thanks, hugs and kisses, Andrea, right? Just move it forward, keep it going, otherwise things sit, and we don't get as much done. The third idea, and every time I say this, I want to do it with jazz hands.
Do it.
Yeah, right? Don't just say it, display it, right? You're kidding, these aren't spirit fingers. So, you know what I'm talking about. You know you saw the movie. So, don't just say it, display it. Anyone have any clue of what I mean by that? What do you think?
Be the example.
Yeah. Yeah. So arguably, 93%, I'm sure you've heard this stat before, 93% of our communication is nonverbal, right? And that means that as much emphasis as we put on the actual words, because they are important, they don't count for as much as we want to think they do. And to prove my point, my favorite word in the English language is a 4-letter word. It starts with F. Anyone want to guess what that one is? Keep it clean, folks. Keep it clean. It's the word fine. How many different ways can we say the word fine? Anyone got a significant sweetie at home? Good morning. How you doing? How many different ways can we hear the word fine?
Fine.
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 How do I look? Fine.
Fine. How you doing? Oh, fine. It's good morning. Right? Can you please pick up your mess? Fine. Same word. It's just all in how we say it. Hello is another good example. Hello. Hi. Hello. Some people, my favorite one too on Facebook, you ever seen this? People write HBD instead of happy birthday. I'm like, you couldn't be bothered with typing happy birthday? You couldn't write happy birthday? No, just HBD. Oh, we're in such a rush. Thanks. Take these things personally. No, just kidding. It's the tone, right? And emails can be tone deaf, right? So can text messages. My sister texted me earlier this morning and she did it all in caps and she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's for the screening." And I was like, "So I didn't take it that way." But 93% of what we're saying is nonverbal. So when we think about our unique style of communicating, I work with clients on this a lot. I had a client who was she was actually interviewing for some fairly high positions. On paper, she's amazing. Like, you can't beat her. She's just got every credential, every qualification you could think of. When she would go in for the first interview, she wouldn't get the call back. And she was so frustrated, and she said, what is happening? And so we sat down, we did some mock interviews, we tried some things out, and it became very clear what she could not see was that she had a way of looking away and staying looking away whenever someone would ask her a question, to justify or prove or illustrate some level of experience that she had in her career. So a lot of times it was just, she didn't know she was doing it, but it was happening. So we had to focus on her staying in the space of the conversation whenever she would have the interviews. Luckily, as it turned out, we did some work on that and she ended up having multiple offers and didn't know which one to take. That was another problem to have. But our nonverbal communication counts for a lot. And it's not just how we say it, it's also the impression that we leave when we are walking into a space, how we look when we're sitting in a meeting. By the way, how long does it take for us to judge someone?
Seconds.
2 seconds?
1 minute.
1 minute?
3 seconds.
3 seconds? You guys were kind. Harvard study points out that it's 1/4 of a second is all it takes to form a judgment on someone. And we know this because we've heard of terms like implicit bias, and we know that our brains are wired to judge instantly because we're trying to see, does someone intend to do me harm? That's the scientific profile of it all, right? That's the behavioral reason behind it all. But the reality is that we look at someone and we first judge, are you about to blow up my day? Okay. And if I can trust that you're not, now I'm judging you, oh, you chose those pants. Whoa. Yes, you thought that was a good hair style. And I know it sounds incredibly mean and judgy,
Yeah.
but I promise you all, with all the love in my heart, you've been there. And it's not to say I'm better than you or you're bad. It's because we are designed to determine factors of another person on whether or not we trust them to continue building a relationship with them. We all judge. We all do it. We can't stop ourselves from it. We're wired to do it. But if that's true, the first point of judgment is based on looks. The second criteria point is what actually comes out of your mouth next. That's the second criteria point that we judge people on. So first it's, maybe you find an exceptionally kind person who is distracted and doesn't judge you based on your appearance. Okay? And then they hear you speak. Have you ever had that experience? Or do you ever meet someone and just instantly go, no? I don't like that guy. Or you meet someone and you're like, I don't know what it is about her, but man, I just love her. She's the best. She's the best. Right? It's a vibe we get. It's a feeling we get. I was working with a Simon Business School graduate, or candidate, I should say, recently, who was being asked for Veterans Day to do a whole bunch of news interviews and give many, many talks about his experience as a veteran. He had a unique story in that he wasn't born in the U.S. He actually came here from South Africa and joined the military after high school. And he grew up in this area. And he was telling me, I said, so what's your story? Tell me, your background. So it starts off with the typical, I was born on a farm in 19, whatever, that's where the story began. And then he had this one line where when he said it, his entire demeanor changed. He didn't recognize it, but I did, because this is what I do. He said, I was sitting there, we were in a combat zone, and he said, and I quickly realized that I had to accept the fact that I was going to die. Once I could do that, then anything was possible. And when he said it, he went from like, blah, 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 this is what I did, da, 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 da. And he slowed down and he became very intentional in that moment because he was really reliving it and thinking through it. His nonverbals changed completely. So I suggested, this is where your story begins. This particular moment, because it exudes a nonverbal cue in you that very obviously shows you're being thoughtful. That's where the story begins. So he shifted it around, he tried that out. He did a whole bunch of news interviews and actually emailed me the other day. He was like, thank you so much. He's like, I felt like I was rambling the whole time about I was born on a farm and blah, 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 blah. It changed everything for him. It gave him more confidence because he could start in a place that was intentional. Versus when somebody says, you ever go someplace and somebody goes, so what do you do? Well, but if somebody says to you, what's the coolest project you've worked on recently? It's an entirely different question that elicits an entirely different response. So one of the things I like to walk all of my clients through is what I call find your 3 words. So this is, every time I work with a client, this is the baseline of what I start with for them. And that is, imagine that you are walking out of an exceptional meeting. Could be a sales meeting, could have been a networking meeting, could have been, you attribute whatever you want to it, an amazing meeting where you were brilliant. Okay, we're going to do jazz hands here, right? You were just brilliant. It was amazing. You felt powerful, confident, presented yourself in just an amazing way. And you leave the meeting, but then you get to be a little fly on the wall and you get to listen to the qualities that the people who interacted with you are saying about you. The question is, what 3 qualities would you want to hear said about you? So to give you an example, my 3 words most often are fun, knowledgeable, and real. So I know I've done well if I can leave a situation and I can hear people say, God, that Andrea, she's fun, she knows her stuff, she's knowledgeable, she's very real, she doesn't pull any punches, who she is who she is. If I've done that, then I've done well. Those are my 3 words. So what would your words be? Think about them, write them down. Or write down what are my 3 words and give this some thought. Because, and if you have them, please shout them out, feel free to say them. If you have these 3 words, you have something to focus on in terms of your nonverbal communication. Because to me, there's a verbal and a nonverbal clue for each word. Fun communication verbally means I'm usually saying something very silly. Even in situations where I'm trying to teach or learn or coach or whatever, I gotta have fun. So I will say funny things. I will share real stories about myself, real experiences. Why not? The nonverbal is, I gotta be smiling and enjoying myself. I can't stand behind podiums and just stand and lecture. Nobody wants to do that. That is not a nonverbal clue I'm interested in. Same thing with knowledgeable and real. I have parameters for those that help me understand if I'm doing something and I recognize I'm not feeling a certain way or I'm not behaving in a certain way, then my nonverbal cues aren't matched up to where I need to be. And that will give me the kick in the pants reminder to go and do more. And what I get for these 3 words, when I am fun, knowledgeable, and real, I can connect with people in a way that adds value. Because it's not about me, it's about what they get out of the situation that's most important to me. So find your 3 words. Test it out, work on them, ask yourself, does anyone have a word or 3 that they want to share? Who's feeling bold? Who's feeling jazzy? Go for it.
I'm kind of having trouble with my 3rd word though.
Okay.
But my first 2 are transparent and fun. My 3rd word, I'm trying to find a way to verbalize. Like when I'm after I leave a conversation, people are always like, I felt very comfortable talking to Joe.
Okay.
And I feel like people are willing to even overshare
Okay.
once we're connected.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to like verbalize that into 1 word.
So I
as
have a
just
word
use
that comes
4
to mind. I
together.
don't know if it jives with you, but I'm thinking of a Harvard Business Review article that I was just reading. Warmth. It was talking about the difference in leading between warmth versus strength, and the study found that warmth wins every time, although strength is a requirement. But warmth is the ability to get someone to trust you quickly. Trustworthy might be another word. People who feel that suddenly they're telling you their every personal story. Yeah. Anyone else have words?
Engaging?
Engaging, yeah. So here's the question, what do we need to do if that's our word? What do we need to do to be engaging? Right? What's the verbal cue for that? What's the nonverbal? What can we do to make a difference so that people see we're engaging? Maybe we ask questions, we're smiling. It's little things. I had an interview experience, not an interview, I had like what do you call those? Like informational interviews? I got laid off from a job, and I was all like, I didn't know what to do with my life. And a friend of mine set up an informational interview at a local, I won't say where, a local organization. And I walked into the room, and the gentleman I was meeting with, this was very interesting. He left the door to his office open and didn't offer to take my coat. He just kind of said, like, come on in, sit down. It was one of those weird moments where I'm like, are we going somewhere? Are we going on a hike? Like, why am I thinking? There was no privacy to the conversation. His admin was like right next to me, and I'm like, okay, what's happening here? So I took off my coat and asked, may I shut the door? And he goes, oh, yeah, sure. So the conversation goes on. 90 minutes later, I'm shaking his hand, thank you so much, this was really great. I really enjoyed meeting with you. He goes, can I confess something to you? I said, sure. He said, I'm not telling any lies here. He goes, when I saw your resume, that you only studied at SUNY Geneseo, I didn't expect very much from you. I didn't think this conversation would be more than maybe 20 minutes. And I was deeply wrong. and if I had a position on my team right now, I'd offer it to you. And I was like, okay, thanks, right? He said, but this is why he had those nonverbal cues, because he didn't care. He wasn't invested in the conversation. So here comes, little old SUNY Geneseo grad and blows him away. And he did call me months later and said, I have an opportunity. And I was like, not so much. Because I got to see a little bit more about his judgment side, and it wasn't a good fit for me. That wasn't the only reason. But nonverbal says a lot, more than we think it does. So if I were to have asked him that day, what are your 3 words, buddy? Would rude and judgy?
I got 3 words for him.
Yeah, right, exactly. Rude, judgy, and we'll leave the 3rd, right? We're just going to table that one. But that's where that led to. So I say these 3 things to you to consider. I'm open to questions if you have them. One thing I will leave you with is a quick story of an experience that I had when I, years ago, worked in radio, back in my former life, in my 20s, when I had so much more energy, man. Oh. So I worked for a radio station, and I remember that morning, I was new. I had no experience working in radio. I had walked onto a morning show position, which is unheard of, right? And here I am happy-go-lucky in my little job. And during one of the commercial breaks, this woman called into the studio. And my co-host recorded the entire phone call, unbeknownst to me. Okay? So he had this entire phone call recorded, and this lady was like, who is that Andrea Holland? Ugh. She's awful. That laugh of hers and her voice. Oh my God. She just went on, and I'm sitting in the corner right? And I'm tearing up. I'm like, it's terrible. So we come back from the break. My co-host plays the call back live on the air, or plays the recorded call on the live broadcast. And I'm sitting in the other side with no button control, and I'm like, what do I do? He's trashing me live on the air. This lady's going on and on and on. So I was all upset. After the show, I run down to my producer's office, and I was like, this was the worst thing. This lady was trashing me, and he played it on the air. And he goes, you want some champagne? I said, well, no, it's 9 a.m. I don't want champagne. What are you talking about? He goes, you just had a pivotal moment in your career. So what are you talking about? He goes, if people have something good to say about you, great. If they have something bad to say about you, okay, you can learn from it. If they have nothing to say about you at all, now you have a problem. And I was like, I don't understand, but I'm still gonna go. I didn't get it at the time, but I understand more and more as time goes on what he was saying. At least I made an impression. I could learn that not everyone's gonna like me. Homegirl just maybe was having a cranky day. Okay, that's fine. But I can learn from it. But when no one has anything to say to you or about you, you've not made an impression. And that means that you're expensible. Right? So make the impression. Think about these 3 things. Ask those questions. Waste no words. Be intentional. Be above the fold. Think about your nonverbal cues, your 3 words. And have fun with it. Test it out. Find a trusted colleague that you can go to say, okay, seriously, this is what I'm working at. Can you help me out? Give me some feedback. Be open to the feedback. And see what results you get. See what happens. Questions from anyone? Thoughts or recipes? We'll take them. Yes.
So on the first 2 points I found, in the past, I did that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And as I went forward in my career, especially probably the last couple of years, I've had some feedback saying you shouldn't ask so many questions, and you should put more fluff into your emails. But so the last couple of years, I would say I've been doing that more, hence I'm not getting as much done. And now I see that, so I'm really appreciative of coming here today.
You're like, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
So a lot of it is tone, right? And we talked about that a little bit.
Sure.
A lot of it is, because I've been on the receiving end of some emails where they're like, I send the fluff, and they go, yes, is the response. And I'm like, do you hate me? Or, I'm not quite sure how to take that. So a lot of it is tone. It's taking the 5 extra seconds to add the high fives and good vibes tag, if that keeps it easy for you. Questions, think about the types of questions. Are they questions that are trigger questions, that are forcing others to be accountable and prove their point to you? Or are they questions that, as they call probing questions, right, ones that dig a little bit deeper and ask someone to think through their thought and explain it to you so that they feel good about their idea? Sometimes those are the only questions we should be asking. But instead of why, or what proof do you have, those can be triggering questions. But if somebody has a great idea in a meeting, and I very simply say, that's different, I've not heard of that. So tell me more. Where does that come from? I'd like to follow the process so I understand it. One of my favorite ways to do it is when people come up with a really brilliant idea, I like to say, okay, explain to me like I'm 5 years old how this one works. Obviously, I can, well, some days I can handle more than a 5-year-old, other days I don't know. But the whole point is, I want them to feel as though they have some leverage and that they can have a little showmanship and show me what it is that they're working with. Yeah.
Sort of tying into that as well, I have noticed that instead of telling somebody that they need to do something, so I'm in commercial real estate, a lot of times we have deadlines, and people will tell me their deadlines, and I have to sort of set the realistic expectation for how long things will take.
Right.
And instead of saying, oh, you're crazy, we're not gonna be able to get all of that done in time,
Right.
I'll ask them the question and say, okay, well, how long would this take? And how long will this take? And do you think that if we did that within this time period, do you think that that'll give us enough time? And instead of being like, that's not gonna get it done on time and here's why,
Yeah.
I've noticed that the more questions I ask that sort of lead them to their own answer,
Yes.
that you get a lot better response.
Yeah, that's always, instead of, this is exactly the point, instead of saying, no way, Jose, right? Or the other way to do it if you don't have a lot of time to ask too many questions is to just say, so what's the priority? Because I have about 3 hours worth of time and my guesstimation is this will take 6. Help me choose what's most important here. And then we'll work at the rest as we get more time. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think about the importance of an elevator speech in terms of if you're looking for a job or you have a business you're trying to introduce or you're selling something? How does that fit into your big three?
Yeah. So, that's a good question. How does it fit into the big three? Well, I think there's a lot with an elevator speech to think about. The first thing about asking questions is, so elevator speeches were usually like, hi, my name is Joe and I sell kites and I really, you should fly some kites, right? What I like to say, I just did this actually with Simon, business school recently, what I like to say is when it comes to business pitches, always have a throwback question at the end of your elevator pitch. So don't just leave it with, I sell kites, you should like them. Here's my card. All right? You want to throw it back and say, when you're not working, what do you do for fun? Or have you ever flown a kite? Or whatever it is. Have a throwback question that asks people to engage with you, not just give you a response on whether or not they like what you just said. Because then you leave yourself open for, it's a vulnerable position to be in. So have a throwback question. Ask people something, anything that engages them on a personal level or a professional level that you happen to know is very important to them. How much time are you wasting a week with this product? Would this make a difference for your office if you had a change like that? Yeah, absolutely. You got 15 minutes, you want to chat? Sure. Right? The way we say it, a lot of times, when people are giving their pitch, they're just very intensely looking at you and saying, please like me, please like me, please like me, right? So we want to be sure that we have some confidence in the way that we say it. But as far as elevator pitches go, I hate the term, but I recognize that it's important for us to be able to represent ourselves in a way that's confident and clear. So, everyone in this room should have one sentence that defines who you are, what you do, and why. And it should be exactly that, a sentence, right? You can use it on a resume, you can use it on your LinkedIn profile, you can use it whenever somebody asks you what you do. But keep in mind that that one sentence isn't the only definition of you. And recognize that when you have the opportunity to use it, you also have a responsibility to use it in conjunction with a way to bring somebody in. Because you saying who you are We are all fantastic and great in this room, but ain't nobody care who you are unless they know what you can do for them, right? There's a great quote, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Consider that when you're thinking about building relationships or getting to know people. Other thoughts, questions? Happy to answer. No? Well, thank you guys so much. My card's in here if you want. I'm fine later.